Thanks again for attending Iowa Ideas. With the Gazette, this is the enrollment factors affecting liberal arts colleges session in the education track. I'm Vanessa Miller. I cover higher education for the Gazette. I've been doing that for almost a decade now. And during the session, I'm just going to be asking questions of our panelists and taking questions and feedback from you all from the audience. So feel free to send those questions through the Whova website or the app if you have them, and I can pose them to our panelists. You can go ahead and send those throughout our discussion. I found that sometimes people feel like there's things top of mind they want to ask and throw in there, and I'm totally up for posing those again to our panel. So that would be, yeah, that's our format. And we're just going to start by thanking our sponsor, actually, Kirkwood Community College. I think we have a little video, a short video to play there first.
Hello, I'm Lori Sundberg. I'm the president of Kirkwood Community College, and we are proud to be a sponsor of this year's conference. The Iowa Ideas Conference brings educational sessions on a variety of topics to Iowans from all over the state. It is a terrific conference, and we are proud to be a part of it. I hope you enjoy your time at the conference. Thank you.
So again, I think we're just going to start out by having the panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about how this topic is relevant to them or what their role is in that capacity. So Jen, do you want to start us off there?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I can. Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Jen Rathje, and I'm an education program consultant with the Iowa Department of Education within the Division of Community Colleges and Workforce Preparation. And within my role, I work with the state of Iowa's Senior Year Plus programs. And so for those of you who are on the call who are not familiar with Senior Year Plus, it essentially serves as an umbrella for a variety of programs that are designed to provide high school students with access to courses that have a potential to generate college credit while still enrolled in high school. Some of those program opportunities are the Concurrent Enrollment program, which you might hear referred to as joint enrollment today through the community college. We also have post-secondary enrollment option programs, advanced placement, among some other opportunities. But essentially kind of in this realm, right, the college credit opportunities that students are taking in high school kind of help bridge that gap between completing high school and starting college. You know, they're supplementing their high school curriculum with challenging courses that might not have otherwise been available to them. And so allowing those students to get that head start on college and towards a future degree program, which many of those will be through liberal arts colleges. So happy to be here today and looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks. Yeah, go ahead, Cornelia.
Hi, thanks so much, Vanessa. And it's great to be on this wonderful panel with panelists from other Iowa institutions and agencies. I'm Cornelia Lang. I serve as the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Education in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, which is the largest college at the University of Iowa. We have about 14,000 students in our college at the moment, and we offer more than 70 majors across 40 different academic departments. So we truly are all of the liberal arts and sciences at the University of Iowa. Our college also oversees the general education curriculum for the university, which most of the other undergraduate colleges also use. And we do a lot of educating of students in public health, business, education, and some of the other undergraduate colleges during their first 2 years.
Great, thanks. And yeah, Doug, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, I'm Doug Shapiro, and I'm the executive director of the Research Center at the National Student Clearinghouse. We study trends in student enrollments and degree pathways and graduation outcomes nationally, all using data that the Clearinghouse collects directly from the colleges. And we publish those trends to help inform educators and policymakers so they can better understand how to increase student access and student success. But we focus on quantitative administrative data. So we don't do opinions or surveys or anything like that. And our work applies to really all colleges and universities in the U.S., not just to liberal arts schools, but certainly as a proud graduate of a liberal arts college myself, this has always been a topic that is very, very near and dear.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and President Brand.
Hi, thanks, Vanessa. And I join Cornelia in saying I'm thrilled to be on this panel with everyone. So my name is Jonathan Brand. I'm the president of Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Iowa, a school of just under 1,100 undergraduates. Undergraduate education is liberal arts education is our mission, our core, our foundation. And so obviously a topic like this that Vanessa raises, I couldn't imagine not wanting to be a part of this conversation. So thank you very much for having me as a part of the panel.
Yeah, sure. And I thought we would just start. I'm sure many of the people on our panel or on our in our session today know this, but so we're all working with the same definition. I wondered if you guys could kind of talk a little bit about what we mean when we're talking about liberal arts education colleges, beyond just the cursory glance. Like what are we talking about?
So do you want me, Cornelia, anyone, do you want me to take a crack at this? So Vanessa, it's so funny because I sat down, I started writing notes and the definition of the liberal arts is really it's very complicated and lots of people will give very different definitions of what it means. So I can sketch out a couple of them. At one level originally there were these 7 subjects that students had to study, sort of the traditional liberal arts, right? From grammar and logic to geometry. And that was sort of the classical definition of the liberal arts, thinking that together they would provide a unified sense of reality. So that's sort of one definition. There's another definition, which I think one would say is more focused on a broad set of skills. Critical thinking, which alone, I have to say, has a range of definitions. Critical thinking to artful and captivating communication, to the ability to work in teams, to understand different worldviews and viewpoints of others, sort of this notion and gesture towards diversity. That I think is another way of thinking about the liberal arts. Some people see the liberal arts as a residential college, undergraduate college experience. They'd say that's the liberal arts. Those are just 3 right off the top. I like to think of it, for my definition of liberal arts, it's what remains after you've forgotten everything you learned in class. That's how I think about the liberal arts.
I like it.
That's a great start, Jonathan. And I think we spend a lot of time in our colleges. It's one of the pleasures of working at a university with faculty colleagues is we spend a lot of time actually talking about this. When we put together our foundational requirements that are part of the general education curriculum, we are keeping an eye toward that traditional idea, but also bringing it into the 21st century. And I might add astronomy to that core group of topics.
The physicist, of course.
Right, exactly. But I think when I sat down to try to write a little bit on my own about this, I thought, a college of liberal arts and sciences is sort of a bigger, more modern version maybe of that title, is a place. I thought about it as a place and a space in which we allow students to explore what turns them on, what makes them tick, what gives them passion. And the end goal really is to provide students with that broad education so they are fully prepared to engage in the world as citizens and leaders in an increasingly global and pluralistic world. And so that's, when we think about the kinds of things that are required of all students, and then the kinds of things that are required in the various academic pieces of curriculum, from a minor to a certificate to a major, we're keeping all of those things in mind. And more our focus has also been on helping students make connections with what they're doing in their classes and in their curriculum, but with the reality of how those connect to the world.
Sure, yeah. And just a follow-up that I think each of you can probably address in a different way, but I'm wondering, is a liberal arts education still as in demand as it has been historically, both among students and from the employer standpoint? Has that changed at all?
Doug, do you have some
What a
data
great
on
question.
that?
Yeah, I know, right?
Well, you know, it's interesting because I love hearing these very, in some ways, very personal definitions of what a liberal arts college is. And I think it definitely means different things to different people. But it's, you know, we don't actually use liberal arts as a category of institutions in our data. I mean, we're again, quantitative data. And you know, the Department of Education doesn't use it either. That when the federal department collects data on college characteristics, they don't define and they don't have a code for, you know, this is a liberal arts college and this is not. It's same is true even in the Carnegie classifications of institutions of higher education. They don't use that term for colleges, but they do talk about arts and sciences majors within institutions.
Mhm.
And they mainly define these in contrast to kind of so-called professional programs like engineering and business and education. So it kind of gets to what Cornelia was talking about in terms of preparing students for a lifetime career, not a specific profession. And I think, you know, I think these kind of arts and sciences majors are generally what people think of as liberal arts, but with the caveat that really nowadays, I think in common usage, most people think of that term as really more of a synonym for just the humanities. They forget that there's the and sciences that comes with liberal arts. And so when we look at the demand for liberal arts majors, that's one thing that we can do in our data, and we've found quite a bit of decline, certainly in the humanities, and also even in many of the social sciences and physical sciences, largely at the expense of things like engineering and computer science, although that's a tricky one because technically that's a liberal arts. I'm sure you all have that as a major in your institutions, but I think many people would argue today that that's probably more like something like engineering than it is something like, say, physics or biology, which are again more classical liberal arts and sciences. So I think the demand coming from students has diminished, but the demand from employers is a much bigger question. I think many employers still value the kinds of critical thinking skills that Jonathan talked about, and the ability to learn and think constructively about problems and engage with complicated issues. That hasn't changed in my view.
Yeah. Jen, what are you seeing among students at the high school level? I mean, there is the question as to whether some of that enrollment decline is happening again because of the joint enrollment piece of it. Maybe they're doing some of that while in high school even.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like landscape, I mean, Iowa, we have phenomenal participation with students taking college credit opportunities in high school, specifically through joint enrollment. I mean, in academic year 21, and we kind of report in the rear. And so we don't have information for last year just quite yet, but we had over 47,000 students participate in college credit opportunities. And primarily those opportunities are classified as arts and sciences courses. So about 66.3% of those courses fall within that range, and they're specifically kind of the highest subject areas that you're looking at are English at like 25%, and then you go down to social sciences and history 17%, you know, mathematics then falls in somewhere around 8%. So the opportunities to provide them to students is very well supported across the state by you know, multiple stakeholders. And so we do see that enrollment there, you know, and I think just for the sake of, you know, the opportunities, you know, students are just having that chance to get engaged earlier and hone in on those really valuable skills that they have. And I know if you're looking at as far as an impact of it, right? There's a lot of, I mean, Doug can probably talk about a lot of national research that goes to show that supports the benefit of students who have experience taking these college credit opportunities over students who don't, you know. And in Iowa specifically, actually last year, we released a report for outcomes of jointly enrolled students, looking at what that looked like, and some kind of, essentially it analyzed a 2011 graduating cohort of students for the 2011 graduating class, and it looked at them over an 8-year period, allowing for up to 200% time to completion of not only a community college education, but also completion of a 4-year public college or university setting if they were going directly there. And it analyzed the 2 cohort groups, like those who had college credit experience in high school and those who did not. And kind of some of these notable findings that they found, and I'll pull that up, was that essentially these jointly enrolled students entered post-secondary education directly following graduation at a higher rate. Their time to degree was slightly shorter, and they were less likely to drop out. But one thing that is interesting is that the credits earned by students, the more credits they earned, impacted whether or not they directly enrolled into a 4-year institution. And so generally the higher number of credits earned while in high school, the higher percentage of those students who immediately went to a 4-year. And so like part of the report states, you know, if students earned close to 30 credits, they were 63.8% more likely to go directly to a 4-year institution. And it was 28% if it was just a student who earned 1 or 2 classes. So it was really interesting on some of these numbers that we found, right? And they also, students who went to a community college, they transferred actually more so than their peers to a 4-year college from the 2-year college if they had had prior college credit in high school. So there's a lot of benefits to a lot of it, you know, to support some of this. And the exciting part for me was that it was actually looking at our Iowa students in that cohort. And so we're hoping to continue to monitor that information over future years.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because I think there is some people who think perhaps that taking these classes while in high school might just eliminate the need for you to tackle any gen eds in the liberal arts college and jump straight into the business college. But that's not necessarily what you're seeing. You're seeing that it actually, you know, promotes them joining those colleges or pursuing those. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say. And Cornelia, you may or Jonathan have other you know, things working with directly with the institutions yourself. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things that we see that I think is really interesting that aligns and corroborates Jen's data is that we see students who are we see most students are bringing some amount of transfer credit, not all, but many of our students, and many of our students are bringing some portion of their gen ed curriculum, often in the social sciences or interpretation of lit or maybe a writing course. But what really is heartening to us is that it's almost as if these students are using their sort of extra time to pursue a second major or to pursue electives in an area that they're really passionate about, or adding a interdisciplinary certificate to their program. And certainly, as Jen said, there's a small population of students who really, for financial reasons, really need to graduate in 2.5 or 3 years. So this potentially 20 or 30 semester hours of credits, which is about 8 or 9 courses, can really help them have a leg up. But we're not seeing that is taking the place of then those students just trying to get out as fast as possible. If anything, I think it provides them a little bit of breathing room so that they don't have to overstack their schedule and can really, again, enjoy that benefit of exploring in the time and space they have to look at all of our programs.
And I will say, Jen, Cornelia, our experience at Cornell is identical. In fact, the notes that I had taken about this track exactly what you just said. And I would say for us, in addition to everything you mentioned, we have students who want to study abroad, and coming in with 2 years allows them to have more. We're on the block system, so students can study abroad multiple times, and this allows them to do that. I think we have several transfers who will come in thinking they're going to graduate in 2 years, and they can, and then they're like, oh no, I want to keep doing this for a while longer.
Yeah, no,
But yet they've had, as Jen points out, they've had the experience of doing some college level work. So then that transition to college is not as abrupt as it is sometimes when students come directly from only having had high school courses.
I will ask Cornelia whether you have this experience. I mean, the student body size, of course, at Iowa is so much larger than at Cornell College. One of the effects of having a higher number of students coming in with credits is our 100 level introductory courses might have slightly, especially in traditional humanities areas or under-enrolled areas, tend to have lower enrollment yet because those students will have satisfied those requirements before they even get to Cornell. That is one impact that I think we have seen.
Yeah, we have not, I think just because of the scale, Jonathan, is so different. And our data shows that students are often bringing in social science credit. So we haven't seen it quite as much. We also have a few requirements that involve humanities fields that are not transferable. So we have a diversity and inclusion requirement, which students rave about. We have more than 60 different courses approved from more than 35 academic departments. And this is, we're pretty strict on this. The rest of the program, we're pretty generous about, but this is a requirement that often is based in the humanities and students can't transfer that. And that's had very good outcomes for us, although sometimes a little frustration from students and families.
Yeah, well, and I guess I'm wondering, so if we are seeing some enrollment declines, what do you think is behind that? If it's not joint enrollment, taking away some gen eds, is it just that, enrollment is declining across the board, not just in liberal arts colleges, or what are your thoughts around that?
Well, it is certainly declining across the board, and has been for many years, going all the way back to the aftermath of the Great Recession. I mean, enrollments nationally peaked in around 2011, 2010, and they've been slowly kind of sliding out, maybe 1 or 2% a year, 1.5% every year until 2020, when suddenly they really started to drop from the pandemic. And most of that, in the first year of the pandemic, almost all of that decline, which was a large decline, almost all of that took place in community colleges. So I think most four-year colleges were not terribly affected. But in the second year, that really changed. So in the second year of the pandemic, I mean, in 21, 22, we saw far more larger declines in four-year colleges, and still more declines again in the community colleges. But within that, as I was saying before, if you look at things like humanities majors, for example, they fell at about 4 times the rate of decline. Students enrolled in humanities majors compared to all other majors during the last few years during the pandemic, about 4 times the rate of decline. And if you just compare head to head, like humanities majors to STEM majors, it's about a 6x difference. In other words, the decline in the number of humanities majors is about 6 times as steep as the decline in the number of STEM majors over that time. So there's no question that the pandemic has had a huge effect, and I think when you look at those second year declines at four-year colleges, I think it was not so much about the virus per se. It wasn't because students were staying away because of closed campuses or online instruction. Once the vaccines were widespread and colleges had kind of figured out this hybrid instructional modes, most of those fears kind of dissipated. And we saw, particularly in more selective colleges, a complete rebound in the number of new freshmen coming in. But at all the less selective colleges in that second year, continued declines. So it was a really big split. But the first year of the pandemic, there was no difference in the rate of decline in enrollment between really elite colleges and all the way down the selectivity scale. They all fell by about the same amount. But in the second year, the elites were able to rebound right away, and everyone else continued to decline.
And I would kind of jump in on that. So just from an aspect of high school students accessing, with regard to the COVID-19 pandemic, you're right. Like within that first kind of COVID year, we didn't really notice as much of a decline, but that second year for students accessing joint enrollment, I mean, we saw an 8.8% enrollment decrease. So we were at an all-time high in Iowa at 51,000 students, almost 52,000 students. And, we dropped down to just over 47,000 students. And so, but what we have noticed though, is that we are rebounding, right? We haven't gotten final numbers in, but we are seeing that is increasing, and students are taking more opportunities to engage in those courses. So.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about University of Iowa, and then I'm quite curious about Cornell College as well. I think what Doug says is largely been our experience, although I would say that in the second year of the pandemic, I think the University of Iowa, we did a lot of in-person campus visits. We were one of the only Big Tens that during 21 that had on-campus visits. And we had, this past year, we had one of our larger incoming classes to the university. We had an increase in our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences across the majors, actually. And I think some of that was just due to students who came and visited our campus and met people in person were more likely to come than some of our campus peers who were more closed. So I think that worked in our favor. And so we're rebounding a little bit. I think one of the things we also see a lot in our college is students will have a primary and a secondary major. And I'm not sure, Doug, if your data on majors takes that into consideration. A lot of our students actually double major across the sciences and humanities, which we're really pleased about. And it's one of the benefits in being in such a large college, and that in some of our humanities majors tend to have fewer overall semester hour requirements, and that they pair very nicely with a major that might have slightly more. And across those two majors, students are able to pretty easily fulfill their foundational requirements. So that's something we're seeing in our college.
Yeah, well, and to follow this, Doug, thanks for raising this. So we stayed open through all of the pandemic. We made it 100% possible for our students to take courses on campus or online, with the exception of some courses like lab sciences. You had to be on campus. Interestingly, last year, 21-22, we had one of our largest classes in our 170-year history. We were up almost 30% from the year before, and it was terrific. And I owe some of it to, as Cornelia mentioned, to having on-campus tours the year. I mean, we just said we're going to figure this out. That's a tactical issue. We will figure this out. And the block system, and I won't go too far into this. The block system turns out to be the perfect academic model for a global pandemic, and so we could reduce transmission. I mean, our students would be in classes of on average 15 or 16 students for a month. So the interaction between students was minimized. And we had schools calling us and saying, hey, we're going to try the block system for a year. Could you help us? Mm-hmm. And so it was the perfect model for reducing transmission. And we went 3 months without any COVID positive cases among our students. Wow. And we're on the front page of the New York Times for this even. So last year was a great year, and this year was another good year. Interestingly, our second largest class in 10 years after last year. So we'll see where this goes. But I do think, Doug, that the strong schools are going to get stronger more quickly, and the weaker schools are going to get weaker more quickly.
Well, and that's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Cornelia.
Well, I was just going to say, one of the things I've heard about, thinking about student success in and during the pandemic and sort of coming out of the pandemic now. One of the things that you read about in the papers and Chronicle of Higher Ed and other publications are, the suspected lack of adequate preparation in high schools. And again, I think this is where the block system helps out. Jonathan, I think I've heard recently from some colleagues who have freshmen at Cornell that there was an ability to do sort of an introduction to college block. And maybe you do this anyway, but I think during the pandemic, this is something that is going to be more important to us than ever before. We've been experimenting at University of Iowa with some summer bridge programming that we provided for that transition from high school to first year college courses. And I've just been really impressed with the things I've heard you're able to do in that first module to kind of get everyone on the same page. And I think, again, probably important before the pandemic, but critically important after the pandemic.
Yeah, well, thank you. I do think that we haven't talked, Vanessa, about all of the learning loss coming out of COVID-19. But from K through 12 through colleges and beyond, this is something we're going to be working through for decades. And persistence and core academic abilities and competencies and confidence and mental health, these are all really significant realities that are, I think, facing all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. It almost seems like, I know you mentioned earlier, some of these kids who are taking joint enrollment classes maybe need to leapfrog those earlier, classes in college, but then maybe there are others too that had some of this learning loss that need to have some of those basic skills, still. I don't know if that's more or less, or if you're seeing both of those trends.
Others, I mean, I think we're seeing a whole range of experiences right now. It's a little bit uncharted territory for us, frankly. I mean, I think part of higher ed or part of education right now is it's very hard. It's almost impossible to take a year and say next year is going to be like it. Every year at the start of an academic year, you have to sit down with faculty and find out what the experience is, because it's different every year right now, which is interesting. It just makes finding a good model and going with it, I don't think works anymore. Every year we have to reinvent based on the needs of our students as they come in.
I think actually the pandemic I think we've always wanted to do that. That's a best practice. And I think, in a college as large as ours with, almost 700 faculty, it can be challenging to have those conversations across the college. But one of the silver linings of the pandemic was that it forced us to have those kinds of conversations. And I'm hoping they continue. I mean, one of the things I think that's a guiding principle, especially in my role overseeing undergraduate education in our college, is how do we meet students where they are at? And I think that can be a tension in the model of the liberal arts, where there's these ideals that you want to hold students to, the standards and ideals, and the reality of who our students are now, much more socioeconomically diverse, and how can we actually meet them where we're at, especially looking at the curriculum at a public university. We have an obligation to meet students where they're at and to help them get the training they need, get their degrees, and graduate in a timely fashion. And so I'm as difficult as the pandemic has been, and there have been many losses for many people, I do think it has brought that conversation much more to the center of our discussions in a way that it never has before. And I think it's something that we have to revisit every year. And especially, we've been talking a little bit about enrollments and the long-term prognosis. And I think, and Doug could probably speak to this better than me, but I mean, we've been following the demographic changes of our population as a whole, and there are simply not as many students, especially in the Midwest, of the age now that will be coming into the college years over the next 10 years. And so that is something that, in addition to COVID, we were already talking about before the pandemic, and that may have an impact in particular on liberal arts colleges.
Yeah, and kind of getting to some of that, we're actually getting a few questions, so I'm going to throw them out there to you guys, because one kind of leapfrogs on that. The person says, this panel has touched on new student enrollment, but I wonder if retention has been an issue during and coming out of the pandemic, and while people experience economic uncertainty. So how are your institutions addressing retention, and has that been an issue basically?
Cornelia, do you want me to, I mean,
Yeah, you go first and then
yeah,
I can
well,
tag team.
I think it's a great question. And I think retention is a major issue at colleges and universities, definitely at Cornell.
Mhm.
I mean, there's one college readiness and persistence and preparation and interest in being in college. I had a couple of years ago, I think this is pre-COVID, seen a chart regarding the mental health of high school graduates. And amazingly, what I saw was the trend is down, that when students graduate from high school, they are at their emotional lowest point when they come to college. You would expect, I got my degree, I'm moving to college, that it would be an upward trajectory. It's not. And so we have students, and this is nationwide, who come to colleges and they have anxieties and concerns, and they're not sure that they want to go to college. They're not sure how college will connect them. I mean, Cornelia talks about developmental advising. I mean, that's really what we do, is to help students find their paths. We don't tell them what their path is. They have to find it themselves. And that creates a lot of anxiety for students. And another part of COVID, an outgrowth of this, is students, and our students, I would include in this, they have had a harder time remembering what it's like to live in community. They are used to living in their homes with COVID, and now suddenly they're like, oh, I have to share X and Y with somebody else, and I have to interact with that person. That creates a whole nother level of challenge that we have to work through. So take that, of course, we haven't talked about the cost of higher education in general with the value proposition. I do think retention and persistence is really where the work, I would say, where the work is. It's the same work as recruiting students. I mean, we ask ourselves, what do students want? What do students need? What can we do that nobody else can do? And that's where we want to live, in those three questions. And increasingly, we have to focus on retention. We have set up at Cornell more of a web around each one of our students. We have something we call the Student Success Center. It's 6 individuals who wake up every day, and all they do is work with students around their academic programs. That's their job, to help students make the transition to college, to make the transition into their classes, to make the transition into their multiple activities. I mean, 40% of our students are athletes, and theater and mock trial and choir and orchestra. It's all of it is just takes a web of people around them to help them sort of take the steps and gain the confidence. It's definitely, that's a great question. It is really where the hard work is right now, and the important work, I would say.
Yeah, I can just add briefly to say that I agree with everything that Jonathan said. That is our focus at the University of Iowa. A lot of focus on our campus, again, because of the scale, has been around first to second year retention. So if you look at, public data documents about our institution, Big Ten peers, most academic institutions, the retention rate is the first to second year retention. That's where the biggest loss happens. What I would say in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, we are doubling down on is what we call our pipeline retention. So there's a lot of university-wide services bundled in some cases around the first to second year transition. But there is also significant attrition at the second to third, and even sometimes the third to fourth year. And one of the things we find there is that financials play a big role as students are bearing the cost of their education over multiple years. And so a big focus of our work coming out of the pandemic is looking very carefully at what we would call pipeline retention. And a lot of it has to do with holistic academic and co-curricular advising support, helping students make meaning and want to come back. And one of the strategies we've been using is not to focus on the reasons why students leave, but actually one of the directors in my office said, let's talk about, we had a retreat on this topic a few weeks ago, and she said, let's brainstorm for a half an hour on all of the reasons why students stay, and then try to amplify and provide those reasons to more of our students, the ones who are leaving. And I really appreciated her framing of that, because too often we start to pick apart what are the reasons why students leave, and we get a little bit depressed and we wish we had more of everything, and really focusing on why are the students staying in this moment when there is more disengagement has been really helpful to us.
Yeah. Well, and maybe Jen and Doug can talk to this too, but I guess I'm wondering if summer melt has become more of a thing during COVID, you know, when students sort of intend to go to college and never do. Have you seen that increase?
I can kind of jump in just a little bit to talk about it. And I don't have specific numbers, but obviously summer melt's a real issue for not only four-year institutions, but two-year colleges and really any post-secondary institution, right, that they're working with that. One thing that the state of Iowa has recently initiated over the past 2 years is a model for college and career transition counselors. And they're actually housed with the community colleges, and 10 of the 15 community colleges sponsor a college and career transition counselor in support with school districts. So there's about 60 school districts that have them, and there's about 30 of them statewide. And really what this is an opportunity for these counselors to go in and support the traditional counseling staff, right? Not take away from, but we know that they have a lot of other things and obligations regarding around mental health with students. And so they're helping to support those career exploration and helping those students with college transitioning. And they typically focus on juniors and seniors. And also additional part of that is to continue in monitoring them within the year after that they have graduated high school to help them make sure that they're successful in whatever pathway that is. So it's not just going into a community college. It's if they want to go to a four-year institution, if they want to go direct to the workforce, if they want to go into some other opportunity, military, helping them to ensure that they have a clear pathway to that success. And so we're definitely going to see more of these positions coming about and to play into support and helping what Cornelia and helping Jonathan with what you guys are currently doing at your institutions, right? You talk about, how do we engage students? How do we keep them? How do we help them to get them there? Another thing that was recently implemented this last legislative session was a requirement for FAFSA completion into the minimum requirements for career and academic planning for high school students. And so basically school districts are going to be required to incorporate that and come up with a process to ensure that every student knows how to properly complete the FAFSA, right? So the free application for federal student aid. And what's really, really beneficial and value about this is that we know that FAFSA completion is strongly associated with post-secondary enrollment. And the students who are least likely to complete the FAFSA are the ones who need the financial aid the most. And so through these additional supports, through the school counselors, through the college and career transition counselors, they're going to be working collaboratively together to help support these students and into launching into whatever is next for them and ensure that they have that seamless process, right? So it's really exciting, and there's a lot of great initiatives going around. And so I think everybody is really at the end of the day working towards the same goal, right? Is to ensure the success of all of our students. So
Vanessa, I'm going to sign off because I have to get to a out-of-state meeting, but thank you so much for having
yes, absolutely. Panel. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks. And yeah, I don't know, Doug, do you guys have data on that, on summer melt at all?
Well, we don't track summer melt.
Okay.
Because we don't really get data on the application process. But we certainly track a lot of retention and persistence more generally. And, what we've seen certainly mirrors what Jonathan and Jen were both talking about. A big part of the effects of the pandemic also had to do with declining retention and persistence rates as well. So we kind of differentiate retention and persistence. The latter includes students who might not come back to the same college they started in, but they transferred and came back somewhere else. So the student has persisted, even though, that college might say, well, we didn't retain that student. And in that first year of the pandemic, it was very interesting. Most of the retention rates didn't go down very much, but the persistence rates did. And that meant that fewer students who would otherwise have transferred, I should say, more students who would otherwise have transferred ended up just dropping out instead. because I think it just became very, very difficult to transfer in the midst of a pandemic. If you think about, how hard it was even to visit a college as a freshman, to have to try and visit a college or get through all the kind of administrative hurdles of transferring when you weren't on campus to begin with, were just proved too much for a lot of students. We also just, generally tracking beyond, so retention and persistence are our first year essentially measures. Did your freshmen come back for their sophomore year? But more generally, there's been an increase in attrition of both forms across all 4 years of a 4-year degree, 5 years in many cases. And what we found, for example, is that, that when we look at the total population of students or learners who have attended some college but have never earned any kind of degree or credential over all the history of the Clearinghouse's records the last 30 years, we find that there are 39 million Americans who are in this status, what we call some college no degree or some college no credential. And that's gone up by over 3 million in just the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, and getting to kind of something too that you talked about earlier with when it comes to enrollment and sort of the strong getting stronger and the weak maybe getting weaker. We did have a question come in kind of referencing that Iowa Wesleyan Southeastern Community College partnership and wondering whether you all think there are going to be more collaborations between liberal arts colleges and community colleges, or just universities and community colleges. Do you see that happening?
I do, for sure. I mean, we alone, I will say 10 years ago, we had maybe 20 articulation agreements with community colleges. We're up near 100 now.
Oh, wow.
I think that is an absolute necessity. And frankly, I think it's a responsibility that we all have. I mean, again, if we're trying to think about the arc or trajectory of a student, we ought to be thinking about those sort of partnerships, because that's what's going to produce a much more of a unified, harmonized experience for our students. Every school in my mind, Vanessa, has a very strong individual identity, and we all come at this with the view that has to be protected above and beyond everything. But when things get serious enough, that's when schools start to talk with each other, and I think it is inevitable that that's going to happen. I mean, again, we have more partnerships now, and as I mentioned, partnerships with community colleges, but also partnerships with graduate schools. University of Iowa being our #1 partner school, whether it's in the law school or in public health. I think those are all just really, and mergers and acquisitions. I think we will see an uptick in schools acquiring other schools. We're already seeing that happening more and more across the country. I can give a few examples, but I think that is the future.
Well, and I can pipe in and kind of share a little bit about that too, because obviously the goal in general, right, is to develop seamless and efficient transfer when you're talking about students who are wanting to enroll from community colleges to public or private institutions, right? You want to try to eliminate that loss of credit, any delays or any unnecessarily duplication of efforts. And Iowa's had a longstanding history in general of focusing on transfer arrangements and agreements with community colleges direct to four-year public institutions. But recently, there's a newly formed Iowa Private Transfer Collaborative. And so there's about 18 private colleges in the state that are part of that collaborative. And their goal is to really look at having a more consistent and transparent approach to those transfer students from the community college level who are earning an AA or an AS degree directly into private institutions. So it's really exciting work that they're starting to look at, and they're starting initially focusing on a few discipline areas like biology, psychology, history, just because those can yield many four-year opportunities and a lot of the coursework directly aligns easily. But, they're looking at how can they come together to better support students directly to the private universities, because we've currently historically done a really great job of that with, our public universities with that process, but, taking a look at a bigger picture and a broader approach, right, and including all opportunities for students. So.
And Jen, I would welcome your thoughts on this. To just piggyback back on this, I think something we're very fortunate to have in Iowa is actually a very well-structured and a higher ed system, and even beyond higher ed, but a higher ed system between public, private, community colleges that we work really well together. I mean, we're very much focused on that end result for all of our students. I don't take that for granted. I think there are states that have much more acrimonious relationships between the colleges and universities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, everybody is very supportive, right? And wanting to, support the student and what their pathway looks like. And that's what at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to, right? Is every individual student's going to be on a different trajectory, some directly to 4 years, some to community college, then to 4 years. Some may say, I'm taking a couple years off and then I'm going straight in, and so how are we supporting our students with that? And so when you're talking, obviously, transfer credits, and coming from a standpoint of, there's a lot of high school students who have a significant amount of credit, and that's going to transfer in the same manner that it is if it's going to be a student who would have regularly enrolled, after high school and then transferred. It's the same kind of concept. So we need to have those support structures in place and seamless transition, so we're benefiting the student there at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I've gotten another question here that gets to Iowa's changing demographics, talking a little bit about how the Hispanic, Latina population is increasing, but that hasn't necessarily shown up in terms of enrollment at the college and university level. So just asking, what are liberal arts colleges doing to get more Latina students, enrolled?
Yeah.
Recruit and retain them. Yeah.
Well, I will say, at least at Cornell, that population, our Latino, Latina, Latinx population is growing, as a matter of fact. Our students come from 45 different states and 15 different countries. And so we draw from across the country and across the globe. I think that any school that is not focused on, you had mentioned the demographics. I mean, in 2025, 2026, we're going to hit this, what we all have referred to as the demographic cliff, where we're going to lose predicted to lose 15% of our high school graduating population, and to see a reduction in the percentage of white students and see a continued growth in our students of color. I think any school that's not paying attention to students of color, not just in Iowa, but across the country, that's going to be a really dangerous path for them. So what I can on our campus, one, first of all, I will say at the front door, having an admissions office that speaks multiple languages, that doesn't just look like me, but that looks like the country we're in, and being able to speak multiple languages, having a website that is not just in English. These are all initial steps. Also, it takes professional development education for all of our faculty and staff, which we do on an annual basis, to make sure that we are a welcoming, inviting, thoughtful community for any student who comes to our campus. I mean, I think that's at the end of the day, is having a culture that is welcoming and inviting. And then it's having organizations and programs that match the needs of what students want and what students need. And so we try to collect data on an annual basis, what we're learning from all prospective students about what they're looking for in a college experience. Having a robust office of intercultural life, having a student success center is good for all of our students of whatever background that they have. So I don't think there's one silver bullet. I do think it starts with recognizing the opportunity and the necessity, and then, as I said, from there, it's really, you've got to impact all faculty and staff and have an orientation towards all of your students.
Yeah, great. Well, we're getting kind of short on time here, but I guess I just wanted to throw out one more. Somebody kind of referenced this earlier in terms of our members who are listening in on this, but there's a lot of emphasis these days on like STEM education and all of that. And I guess wondering if you could just talk about why liberal arts education is still important and why having that sort of well-rounded experience is still meaningful for students.
Do you want me to answer that, or how do you want to approach it, Vanessa?
Yeah, I mean, jump in and go ahead, and then Jen, if you have thoughts, or Doug, if you have ideas on that, that would be great too, and then we can close it out.
I mean, from my perspective, Vanessa, if ever there was the case that we know that college graduates will not have one job in their lifetime. They'll have on average probably 10, 15 different jobs. And so they need those foundational skills that allow them to move and pivot and follow their passions professionally and personally. And again, time immemorial has shown the value of having a strong foundation that allows our students to know how to identify challenges or problems, to creatively research and solve them, and then work with others in solving them. I think that is the foundation for social progress, right? For powerful citizenship. So again, when we're thinking about students and the number of careers that they're going to have over their lifetime, this is the grounding that prepares them for anything. I'll also say, we haven't talked a lot about what employers tell us they want, but Doug had referenced this, I think maybe at the very beginning. When you look at what employers want, the skills that they want to see in their employees, they line up perfectly with the learning outcomes that we focus on in colleges, all around issue spotting, all around the ability to think creatively and to find solutions, to work with others, to be detail focused, to learn how to respect and work with others. That's the part of teamwork. So even thinking about the success of organizations, employers, and what they want, what they need, what they're looking for is precisely what we seek to inculcate or to help each of our students achieve when they graduate.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anybody else have any other thoughts?
Well, I think Jonathan is exactly right. I also think that the data that look at employment and earnings of graduates certainly reinforce this idea that it's the long-term trajectory of a person's career that is really where the liberal arts pays off. When you it's not about your first job after college, because if you look at, I'll go back to humanities versus STEM majors, there's just no comparison in what they're earning in their first few years out of college. But when you look over much longer time periods, you start to see the liberal arts graduates catching up, and that's a reflection of the value that Jonathan was talking about in the long haul. That when you're taking on different challenges over time and working in jobs that, the cliche is jobs that didn't even exist 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That's when you draw on all those important things that you don't, the things that you didn't forget from college.
Yeah. I mean, Vanessa, think what the world is like when we graduate students with big hearts and big minds, and let them do their thing. I mean, that's what it's all about. Students with big hearts and big minds.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much. I think we're out of time, but I really appreciate your insights and perspectives on this. And it's obviously going to be something to keep watching in the years to come. So thanks again. And thanks everybody for listening in.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.